It's the fall of 1888. The location, the fog-filled streets of the East End of London. We're talking about Whitechapel, where a series of brutal murders lit a flame that sent shockwaves through the civilized world and caused a scandal that struck right to the heart of the British establishment. Here on Fake News CSI, we're going to pull out the fake from the facts.
There's some stories that last the test of time. They go on and there's one, isn't there? There's one in particular.
Yes, we're talking about something that's deeply entrenched in the British psyche, and then obviously there's a global phenomenon now when we think of serial killers and we think about who was the original serial killer.
Do you know who we're talking about? It's Jack the Ripper. And we think that there might be some answers in the past that we can go and delve into to find out whether this guy actually existed, who he was, and whether it's fact or fake. So, was he something that the people kind of created themselves because they needed a name, they needed a figure to put behind these struggles that they were experiencing?
I mean, okay, so you consider the hysteria, right? You consider there's people living in poverty and despondency and despair. I think when we're in that state, there's this ominous foreboding, I like that phrase, right? And so you don't have to have a specific idea about what it is that you don't feel is right. But someone suggests there's a serial killer, it will just make sense. You're going to latch onto that.
And naturally the newspapers are going to make suggestions.
Yes.
They're going to have stories. If there's been a murder, they're going to write it up. So the people themselves, as a social phenomenon, are going to latch onto that.
Absolutely.
Read into it more, and most importantly, I think, discuss and gossip it amongst themselves.
In a way, it's kind of providing a service for people who are living in fear, right?
Yeah.
It's because it gives them an outlet. It gives them some kind of location to channel their, oh, see, there you go, I know there's something wrong here. There's a serial killer. It's the same mechanism which allowed things like werewolves and witches and myths like that to be born, is that, you know, we didn't know much.
Well, they've got to have a title, though, haven't they, these myths, these legends, and that's what gave them the name, right?
Yeah.
The Reign of Terror.
The Reign of Terror, that's what they call it.
That's the press.
Yeah.
You can't deny it. You might say that the press are, you know, they're citizens themselves, but they're getting things started by splashing Reign of Terror across the front.
100%, I agree with you. I'm just saying that we also do that as individuals. We will embellish the drama when we are in a heightened state of something to justify our fears. And I'm saying, as you pointed out, that the tabloids were to some degree reflecting.
All right, well, let's look at what's fact and what's fake.
Yeah.
One thing that did happen in the papers, there's a lot of graphic pictures.
Mm-hmm.
What does that tell us about it? You know, from the word go, in my opinion, that's the papers seizing on it. We've got pictures of, you know, slit throats and all sorts appearing in those pages, and people are lapping that up.
Of course they are, but, you know, there's a different understanding. Nowadays, we're more sensitive to stuff like that. Back then, it could have been a journalistic integrity that said, no, this is the truth. The people must see this. They must know it. I can imagine a journalist thinking there's some noble obligation to share this stuff. I'm just saying it's not a fact.
The heroes that brought about Jack the Ripper.
Well, no, I'm saying that perhaps they were misled. All I'm just saying, this is the thing, right? Fact and fiction. This is what we're doing right now. This is why it's so difficult sometimes to decipher the two, because...
Difficult and fascinating.
And fascinating, because there are little presumptions that we make, right? Like the tabloids seizing and things like that. There's little assumptions in just saying that. That they did so knowingly.
You can't help but talk about it, though. That's the thing. It's a fascination. It's a theme that I'm sensing coming up. Same as we have now when we sit and watch our TV series. People have always been fascinated with murders, with conspiracies, with crime scenes. I suppose it's because we're at risk ourselves, so we're particularly concerned with that type of story. Maybe it's some sort of survival mechanism, but there's something else in there. There's something about gossiping about murder that...
There's a fascination, definitely. Attached to something inside of us. What's that quote about? It wasn't about the idea of the abyss is that if you stare into the abyss long enough, you become the abyss.
Which is exactly what's happening to these people. So they're filled with panic. They are becoming it, like you say. The murders are covered in the newspapers, and it's causing an infection of panic amongst people. It's
like
spreading out.
a pandemic.
We wouldn't know anything about that, though, would we?
Today,
no.
But, you know, look that word up. You wouldn't have heard it.
It sold papers now, and it's selling papers back then.
But to be honest, that is always the pandemic. No matter what pandemic you're talking about, the pandemic The overarching pandemic is always fear.
Yeah.
Fear is the thing.
I wonder if there is an inclination of the press, these noble press as you call them, to create the first serial killer.
Of
there
course.
There is a motivation
Of course. Just like we alluded to the person who embellishes their little scrape with death or whatever. There is embellishment. I'm just saying to what degree.
Well,
to what degree?
Let's look at what was fact at the time. What did they enjoy? Jekyll and Hyde, Sherlock Holmes. They loved horror. It was their favourite genre. It was so popular. So naturally, as a writer, I would be invested to embellish, create, report on the facts, or even the fake ideas floating around in our panic-stricken society, and pop it in my papers. And when I see them fly off the shelves, I'd feel that little bit more satisfied that my pocket's full.
Yeah, perhaps.
Story went viral.
It would go viral. It's the perfect climate for something like that to go viral. Okay, so what happened next?
Death toll.
A little before 6 a.m. on the 8th of September 1888, an elderly resident at number 29 Hanbury Street walked into the backyard. The sight that he saw shook him to his bones. On the blood-soaked paving of the yard lay the body of Annie Chapman. Disturbingly, also there in the corner of the yard lay a freshly washed leather apron. In the rising panic and hysteria, residents ganged together and took to the streets, all because that leather apron worn by the Jewish community was found so close to the new victim's body. In the anti-Semitic rioting that followed, innocent members of the community were attacked by angry crowds. The press had a field day and were gathered in Hanbury Street and were writing up the story for all they were worth. Writing melodramatically, it seemed as if a touch would fire the whole district in the mood in which it is now.
Which seems so unfair because they're already a marginalised community, and now suddenly you've got this violence going on within this community when actually, by the facts, I don't think they've done anything wrong.
But this is the thing, it's a trap I want to watch for, and I think this applies to any fake news that gains crazy momentum, is that when it starts to tap into the deepest parts of our fascination, and we all get excited about a story, the truth will never ever be good enough because it will never satisfy how excited we were over the possibilities.
How obsessed we were with what it could have been. Our imagination is
Exactly.
always wilder than the truth. Our fantasies and daydreams.
And that's the danger, is like when you let a story get carried away. When we do find out the truth, we could easily dismiss it because it doesn't.
There's other reasons why we focus on certain myths and legends in a society, though. There's our prejudices, right? So a lot of this was anti-Semitic. A lot of the headlines were anti-Semitic. And the violence was already going on. So surely the police were worried about losing control of the East completely if this was going to continue to happen, and they were going to continue to blame this particular marginalised area of society.
Well, do you think they'd be worried about that? Because in some ways, a divided society is easier to control, you know? Especially when we're talking about revolution being, on the brink of bubbling, So perhaps, again, to adopt this notion that the journalists are devious, they're deliberately playing on the anti-Semitism to feed into this prejudice.
So why would the press be against the Jewish community? What motivation have they got to blame that community? Do you think then that the supposed Jack the Ripper wasn't Jewish then? He wasn't from the Jewish community? What
we do know for a fact is that anti-Semitism was rife, and so we can't know for a fact whether Jack the Ripper was Jewish or not, because we do know that would obviously influence speculation at that time. It just would.
And right now, this particular moment we're talking about, we've only had a couple of murders.
Yes.
It's building, and it's spreading, and it's gaining enthusiasm, and it's gaining fame, which is going to be all to its credit as a legend that it becomes. So already, at this early point, we're being given more mystery and conspiracy theories.
On the streets of Whitechapel, the investigators were in a desperate race to stop the killer before he struck again. Then they turned up a likely suspect in the man known simply as Leather Apron.
Leather Apron was the name that was given to a man that the local prostitutes spoke about and claimed that he would try to extort money from them with threats of violence, and also had a knife.
All the crime documentaries that I watch and all the crime TV shows that I watch, I see that by second murder in, they start to get a bit tetchy. They need to have someone they can blame it on. They need to have a few suspects.
With the police now in a massive search of the neighbourhood, the press now had a wind of what was happening. One popular paper, The Star, broke the big story which sent the streets into panic. A man called Leather Apron was the only name linked with the murders. The police have been trying to keep things low-key.
I'm very conscious of the fact this is the thing. It's all very interesting, but what facts do we have here, right? So we have some murders took place.
Yeah. We've got the society at the time.
Yeah, the hysteria, the
We've
state
got
affairs.
some senior
People getting involved.
Police getting involved. So haven't we got at this point a potential suspect, a man that the locals knew?
Okay, right. So a local guy.
Does he sound likely?
What do we know about him?
Well, we know that the Star newspaper released some stories about him.
Mm-hmm.
They said a strange character who prowls about after midnight, universal fear amongst women of the area.
That's great journalism. A strange character. What does that mean?
Well, it makes me scared.
Yeah, but like you think about.
I don't want to be mean any strange characters.
It's so vague. A strange. It could be anything. Poor guy.
So you're saying that the Star could be just.
It's just very vague. I'm just
making
saying.
It up.
At this point, we were clutching at anything.
Yeah. What happened to your balanced journalism, eh?
No, but
your noble journalism.
No, Lucy, come on. You're missing the point.
Explain.
I'm saying, to what degree does a journalist mislead knowingly? To suggest that a journalist is, playing on the fears to benefit financially, also suggests that the journalist knows how things really are, but is willing for people to know how they're not. So
I don't think he would.
And I'm saying they don't. They don't know how things really are.
Because if they did,
because they're just
we'd
among
have
the
him.
population. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying there's a difference between someone lying or someone just being just as misled as someone else. Maybe even not even. Again, I'm getting into the unknowing way that we journalists and people can fuel a rumor. Not doing so deliberately, but saying, "Oh yeah, I saw something. Yeah, there's this guy, and he was walking. He looked like a strange character, and it said strange character. That's it. It's it." And then it's just some poor dude with a limp or whatever.
Yeah.
And then, of course, our own lens. We see things through our own lens. So, if, for example, we have a prejudice, and prejudice was rife, we know that.
But what triggered the prejudice, though? Something about this actual evidence that's found at the scene, supposedly. We've got a leather apron there. Let's just look at our suspects at this point. Who have we got? What have we got?
So we had the strange character bloke.
The Star newspaper really built up Leather Apron into a demon kind of character and described the most graphic description of this person. The police, it appears, knew who Leather Apron was all along. They thought it was a man called John Pizer.
The press campaign to alert the public to the menace of Leather Apron had two results. Journalists began grubbing around for any info they could. They shadowed detectives trying to find out the identity of their witnesses, bribed officers, a paparazzi approach to get a sensational scoop to beat the opposition to it.
There was a journalist who dressed up as a woman and was walking around the East End hoping that he might be approached by Jack the Ripper. But so many policemen were out in disguise that a bobby on the beat went up to him and said, "Here, are you one of us?" Explained that he was a journalist out there and was promptly taken to the police station and had to justify why he was wandering the streets dressed as a woman.
Are journalists desperate to get the story?
Of course, but again,
previous...
you are looking at it through the modern day lens of, capitalist, money-hungry, corporate London, corporate, tabloid...
But were they paying people off, doing whatever they could to get the story? It sounds very familiar
But
to
I'm
today.
saying there's a collective ignorance among the people we're talking about, even among the journalists.
The apron scare had more disturbing repercussions. The fact that Leather Apron was Jewish focused the anti-Semitic tensions. This spilled over into street violence. Egged on by lurid press speculations, signs of racial unrest began to surface in the neighbourhood. Articles like the one on the 7th of September from the East London Advertiser didn't help.
The murderer must creep out from somewhere. He must patrol the streets in search of his victims. Doubtless he is out night by night, and unless a watch of the strictest order be kept, the murder of Thursday will certainly be followed by a fourth.
Well, interesting story of this clip that there was a journalist that actually managed to predict something.
Okay.
A prophecy press.
Okay.
And then one of our journalists is smart enough to actually predict what's going to happen.
Yeah, a prophetic journalist you're talking
Yeah.
about. Okay.
So then the people that are reading it are actually thinking things to be true that maybe aren't. The press are just forecasting what's going to happen then. Predicting murders like they're predicting the weather. And then it actually happens.
Yeah.
And then people are like, oh, well, the press must know.
Okay. So that's what's happening. Word of mouth, press is helping.
Elements of conspiracy
Yeah.
right from the offset.
Okay, so what kind of conspiracies were floating around at the time?
So, well, there's ideas about who could have been involved. There's the police. There's the press.
See, there you go. So it's involving all the elements which are already existing in the public psyche at the time. So distrust for authority. And of course, because of the discrepancy between rich and poor, and people dislike the police. Bitterness, the royal family, things like this. They're sowing their own seeds.
When was the birth of the tabloid?
You're going to test me like that, right? Like,
Well,
people are going to be like, come on, everyone knows this. I don't know that.
I don't want to date. I'm
No.
just suggesting,
Yeah.
through my question,
Yes.
that this could be the birth of the tabloid.
Okay. Yes.
What do
arguably.
you think?
Arguably. Maybe not the birth, but maybe a prime example, one of the first examples of sensationalism.
Or, maybe readers feeding into that sensationalism. The more surge there is to buy papers could
There you go.
encourage the journalist
And that's what I'm
himself.
getting at, that symbiotic
Yeah,
relationship
it's a
between the
response.
journalist and the audience, and to what degree, like, we can complain about the Sun, Daily Mirror, we can complain about, but to what degree is the responsibility on the people, the consumer?
So it makes money, but who is the ones actually forking out their sixpence or whatever to buy their paper? It's the people. They wanted to read those stories.
This spate of murders and the savagery of the Nichols killing caused such a level of fear on the streets. Scotland Yard got involved, brought in their best, Inspector Aberline, and now the government itself was taking notice. Even Queen Victoria, who said she wanted the case solved, and fast.
But everything changes when Queen Victoria decides to get her involved.
Okay, what changes?
Well, people start to think that it's not just conspiracy. This could actually have some legs behind it, because someone so
go.
senior involved, when, technically some people in society, maybe the upper ilks of society, I'm theorising now, could have looked at this and thought, it's a farce.
Yeah.
We hear of murders all the time. It's Whitechapel. It's known for that. And yet, now, somebody with authorities behind it.
They boost it with their profile.
Yeah.
Suddenly it becomes a legitimate thing. Now it's like, well, this narrative that we've collectively and to some degree subconsciously maybe contrived. Now, well, there you go. It's now it's becoming set in stone, and this is where fact and fiction really can blend, because then suddenly what was just speculation in the minds of many people, as you say, with the royal family getting involved, it becomes fact.
Does
And
it
it's
become
not.
fact,
It's
though? What would be a motivation for Queen Victoria at that time, given the whole context of everything in history, what's going on in France? What would motivate her to want to make the people think that she was invested in this, that she cared about them?
Well, this is where, it opens the doors for all kinds of conspiracies. That every conspiracy theory you can think of, whether you subscribe to it or not, any conspiracy theory I can think of, it's the idea of cultivating fear, or justifying the fear already in a population.
Yeah, I think there was definitely some facts there, but the answers were fake.